Today we're going to use kale, which is a somewhat underused vegetable in the States, although it's gaining in popularity. Back in the day, if you lived in Scotland, it was so popular that instead of saying come to dinner, they would shout out come to kale. So it ebbs and flows. It is a member of the cabbage family, and if it's young, it will cook fairly quickly, but there's some things that we have to do to it in order to make it work fairly well. I'm going to do kale and garlic saute. It's just a real basic method for cooking kale. So I'm going to get a little bit of olive oil into the pan. That's about a tablespoon of olive oil, maybe a little bit more. And I'm also going to add to that about half of a medium onion. And we're just going to let those start to cook. And I've got a couple other ingredients I want to add to that as well. I've got about a teaspoon of black pepper, and you can cut back on that if you want to, but it's something that I think we need to pump the flavor up. You could actually add this later on if you chose and get some of that heat coming in at that point in time. Now the other thing I'm going to add to this, and I'm going to show you what I did to get them to this point, is the stems off the kale. It's got a little bit of the leafy part of it as well, but we want to cook those longer than we cook the leaves. Now if you have very young kale, you may not have to do this as much. This one is a little bit older. You also are then going to put the lid on this. We're just going to let it saute until those stems get a little bit of a head start, because they're going to take longer to cook than the other part will. About 3 minutes, take the lid off from time to time, give it a stir. Now this is what the kale looks like when you get it either from the garden or from the market, farmer's market, or the grocery store. And so you've got these stems down here that are going to be a little bit tougher, and they're also going to go all the way through. So if you look at the kale, make sure that it's not yellow or brown, and if you determine it's fresh enough to start with, then cut off any tough parts that are down below that you can tell are going to be tough or woody, and then take the individual leaves for our purposes here. And again, if it's very young, you may not have to do this, or you may not have to be able to do it to as much of an extreme. And you're just going to cut a V down, but in order to make that easiest, fold the kale leaf in half, then get up here towards the top of the stem and simply cut down there, and that removes the stem. And that's what I did. We have a little bit of leaf here. You can pull that off or you can leave it, and just repeat that. Now for our purposes here today, I cut this into about 1-inch pieces or so, getting it a little bit longer at one end than the other, but that's life. Put that in with the rest of it, and we're going to stir that around. Again, that's going to take about 3 minutes to go. Now with the rest of the kale that we have here, turn that down a tad, what you're going to do is simply roll this up, and you can do several leaves at a time, or you can fold this one up as I'm doing here. And we're going to make ribbons, but we're not going to cut them across. We're just going to roll it up. It's called chiffonade. Make them about 1 inch wide, so it's a little bit different than most chiffonades that we use when we're working with basil and some other vegetables. And we're going to save this part. Now, the other thing to remember with kale is that when you wash it, as you can see, there's not a flat leaf here, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity for sand and grit to get in here. So it's a good idea to wash it by submerging it in water, giving a little bit of rub. You only want to use water, however, not any of the vegetable cleaners. Make sure that you rub it well, lift it out of the water, change the water, and do it again. If you don't see any grit in the bottom of the container, then you're probably good to go. At this point, I'm going to add our garlic. You can add as much garlic to this as you like. I'm adding quite a bit because I want to pick up a lot of that garlic flavor, so I added 2 cloves of garlic, but they were 2 fairly massive cloves of garlic, so it's probably closer to the equivalent of 3 to 4 cloves. This is what I'm putting in here. It's going to serve 4 people. We added the garlic later because we don't want it to get too brown. If it gets brown, it's going to start to get bitter. So put the lid back on there, let it cook about another minute. Okay, we've got this all mellowed out. You're going to keep doing this, keep letting it saute or steam just until the onion gets translucent. That's pretty much what you're looking for at that point. Now we're going to do the leaves, and it's going to cook about another 3 minutes. Now there's going to be some water on the leaves. When you wash the leaves, you don't want to make them totally dry. Just shake them dry. These have been sitting a little bit of time, so they're drier than I would like them to be at this point. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to them. But this is a green that, unlike most when you're making a salad, you want to dry it off because you don't want anything sticking to it. What we're going to do here is add enough water, and you may have to add a little bit more later on. It's going to depend totally on how long your greens have to cook, how much moisture they have on them. If they're a little bit older, they're going to cook a little bit longer. You want to stir the things that you've been cooking ahead of time up a little bit so that they're not going to overcook down there on the bottom. And you're simply going to cook this until the kale is bright green and wilted. Should take somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes, but again, check it as you go, stir it from time to time so that you don't go past where you want to be. Okay, after about 3 minutes, remember you're going to come back and check it. I think we're done. Now, as this is cooked, remember if it starts to look a little bit dry, feel free to add a little bit of water to it. Tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, as much as you're going to need in order to get it to be where you want it to be at the end. All right, we're ready to plate this up. Again, a lot of flavor. This is a vegetable that a lot of us aren't as familiar with as you might be. So if you've not had kale and been a little bit afraid of it, it looks like there's a lot of kale in the container when you're at the market or in the garden, go ahead and give it a try. It's always good, particularly in the garden, to try something new each year. And then season it with just a little bit of kosher salt to bring out some of those other flavors. If you want to spike it just a little bit more, you could squeeze a little bit of lemon juice onto it. But this is just a basic way. It's just a basic start to try a new vegetable. So I hope you'll give it a try. It's kale and garlic sauté.